Welcome back, everyone, to the Green Talent Forum. You're here with us at Localized. We are so grateful to have you join us for this event about career insights, job trends, and opportunities in the world of sustainability. Today, we want to thank our partners at the Posterity Institute, as well as Planet 2049, and our sponsors at Majid Al Futam. We are joined today with Hamdi Olokaya. We are so grateful and honored to have you here, Hamdi. Your story is both inspirational, incredible. We're really honored to be with you today. I'd love to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself as someone who has moved quite a bit from a small village in Eastern Turkey to the upscale streets of New York. We'd love to hear a little bit of your background and how you started Chobani.
Well, Salma, it's so good to be with you and anyone who's watching us or who will be watching us, anyone around the world and here in the States. And I hear Egypt, I hear Bangladesh, I hear Ohio. It seems like one humanity is meeting here. As you said, I am from Turkey. I'm in the northeastern part of Turkey where gets a little cold and snow, mountains, and I'm Kurdish. My family background is tribal nomads. Basically up in the mountains in this winter time, summer times, in the winter time back to the city, back to the town. That's where I grew up. Even today, I still don't know exactly the birthday of of mine. And when people ask me, it's like my mother used to say, we were just coming back from the mountain. So that's approximately these times, September, October time.
You celebrated on your son's birthday, I've heard.
I celebrated my son's birthday. He's October 27. Then Layla was born on October 18. Now I'm celebrating on her birthday. So it's going to be in between.
You take a little bit of everybody's birthday. Yeah. I like that. I like that.
People have a hard time believing me when I say it. It's like it's true story. The only reason we know the year because something magnificent happened that year and we track it back and we say that's the year. But this is usual. In my town, everybody is born January 1. Mine is a little different, is January 20. So everybody's recorded on January 1st, just to make the math easier.
Which makes sense. Logically makes sense. Well,
it is town, tiny, small town, maybe a train in the morning, early in the morning to go to big town. Nomads, as I said, farmers. That's my background. I never thought one day I would be here. That was never planned. But the difference on my journey was early on when the elementary school we had in the town, I took this test and they said I got the right to go to boarding school, which was one of the first students ever gotten, and I insisted I would go, and I went to boarding school far away from home, and that kind of made me in a different path than everybody else who's in the village today. I still have a connection with my friends. I got a text yesterday from my friend who's a teacher in the town. In my mind, I go back to my hometown every day, but I haven't been back in the last 20-25 years, I would say. University in Ankara, published a newspaper, got me in trouble with the government. I find myself in the US on the age of 22 with $3,000 with no English. And that's how it started in end of 1994. Never thought I would be in a field of business. I never thought I would do commerce or any type of entrepreneurship. Because I was really, this was not planned and I came here in a very sudden way. Kind of life took me to this where I am today. The journey has been pretty amazing. This country has been amazing for my journey, and it is amazing from that perspective. But it wasn't until I settled in upstate New York, worked in a farm for a couple of years, get comfortable with the language, and try to make a living because you all have to work, and importing some cheese, making some cheese, and later on finding this old factory out of nowhere, and walked in and said, maybe I could do something about this. And I've had talked about this a lot, but going back to where I grew up in early adulthood, when I was in university, I didn't like business. I didn't like the rich people. I hated anything about capitalism, really. So from my perspective, everything that was happening, injustice, everything was happening in this gap between rich and poor, the resources being used, or how ordinary people, factory workers, farmers, has been treated by other classes or rich. I grew up not liking it. I mean, if there's a word that I would use, I basically hated it. And I do not have any background still today on studying business or working on somebody's company in any dimension other than farm. I never worked anywhere. And I never knew anyone who has done this before, either as executive in a company or started a company before. So I started my journey from basically complete darkness of knowing nothing about business. So it worked out in my advantage, not knowing, but it hasn't been easy.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you have a really interesting, unique story, like going from a shepherd family to a dairy farmer, buying the craft work factory house that was shutting down, essentially, where everybody's telling you it's not going to work, it's not going to work, you can't invest this money, $700,000 you don't have, you can't buy it. And there you are doing it anyway. And so, but not just doing it, right? Doing it from the background of no business, no mentors, nobody there to really guide you. And I'm curious as to how your background, being an immigrant, being someone who hadn't had any background in business, didn't know any of the lingo, didn't know any of the rights and the wrongs of business. How do you stay true to yourself through that process and not take on what everybody's fears are and what everybody's advice is? Which may be good or bad, the wrong or right advice, right? How do you stay true to yourself through that process, even though a lot of people probably told you they've been there before, they know this, they've got the right information, you should listen to them, don't do it, Hamdi, but you do it anyway. How do you decide to do that?
So what you're doing to me right now is going back to those painful times, 10, 15 years ago. And
Yes, that's where we want to be.
Because, everyone can go and make enormous amount of statements later on that you say, I always knew what I wanted to do. I always knew this is what I wanted to do. I always knew that this is the path I was going to take. I say 90% of that is BS. You really don't. In my case, it was 100%. Now, I think this living in a nomadic lifestyle, it has enormous amount of advantage on my life. And I mean, that applies to everybody else in a different way, but it has enormous amount of advantage in my life. What that means is, and especially living in Turkey, the conditions are changing monthly, financial conditions, political conditions. And if you're living in that region, we don't know what's going to happen 3 months from now. So we are prepared that something is not going to be as it is today 3 months from now. So you need to be just dynamically changing in your mind the new realities coming in your way. So between being a nomad, between being in that area, I am not a stranger of moving. I'm not a stranger of trying new things. And people do this all the time, especially when you're a nomad. You go from one location to another location, and you don't know what's going to happen there. You don't know if there's going to be good pasture for your sheep and for your livelihood. You don't know if it's going to be safe. You don't know if your children are going to be safe. I mean, you're taking an enormous amount of risk, but you still do it because that's what you do. I mean, you try to minimize as much as possible, but then when you face the hardships, then of course, it's not welcome, but you deal with it. And that's just part of life. For me, I knew there was not good yogurt. That's for sure. That's just obvious.
Nope.
What is wrong with this country, and why can't they have good yogurt. And you look at certain brands, that obvious brands that you see, they make them in Turkey, they make them in France, they make them all parts of the world. And they're good. Yogurt is a simple thing to make. But here at that time, you don't know if you were eating yogurt or a bag of candy or a cup of candy. It is pretty awful stuff. So then there is this conversation every once in a while you have with people you meet, or people, they know you're from Turkey, and they say, oh, I was in Turkey, I was in Greece, and something that they talk about their trip. Usually within first 5 minutes, the topic comes down to yogurt. Oh, that yogurt we had, with honey and walnut, or that labneh we had that we spread it in our bread. And it's like, there is a disconnect between what's available in the marketplace, what corporate world is telling that Americans would not eat, this type of yogurt that's available in Europe and Middle East. But yet everyone who travels the region, the first thing they wanted to talk after they talk about few big stuff is yogurt. And then I would go to New York City and look at some of those early days of yogurt coming from Europe, from Greece, and how people are buying, and looking at who are the people who are buying and asking some questions. It was very interesting that this was very obvious that there's a need for a good quality yogurt, but yet none of the big guys were going to do it. Now, does that mean I'm the one who should be doing this?
Apparently, yes.
I would be the last person. I go to this factory. I talked about this at TED Talk. I go to this factory and I come out of it and like, look, I have done a little bit of cheese before. I have worked in a farm. I sold some fruits and vegetables on the street. I did work as a dishwasher in some places. I have seen my father and my brothers doing a small scale commerce in Turkey. So it's a foreign land for me. I don't know much about this, but somehow I'm not scared. By looking at this factory, I said, I have a feeling I can make something out of this. And I have this unusual trust, unusual confidence that I will figure this thing out. Like, there's a lot of unknown, there's a lot of shortcoming, there's a lot of stuff, but I'm really focusing on, I can make this yogurt, and everything else, I'll figure it out. So
where does that confidence come from? Is it something that you created or something that you have found you've always had?
I think it's the background. Like, when you're a nomad, and society can do a lot of damaging on you while you're growing up. What are the areas that your shortcomings are, right? So within Turkey, you are in the northeast and smallest town, and the only way you can get from that town to some big towns is you have to be awake at 5 a.m., take this train. By the time you get off from the train, you will be covered with the smoke because that's the train that runs in that. That isolation can be extremely negative, but that isolation can be extremely positive because you don't get exposed to a lot of societal judgmental things that you expose, and by years and maybe months, you kind of trust yourself less and less and less, and you start to believe that you are less than some other ones that were in Istanbul, who are in the commerce, who are making this type of stuff. And if you're a nomad, especially a Kurdish nomad and Northeast nomads, we tend to believe that we were the selected ones, which they really taught us. We were the special ones because we were the ones that we would not stay in town when it was so hot like it is in Egypt right now, that you would go up in the mountains and you would drink the water from the snow melts, and you were the closer to the stars, and you will see the first flowers that are coming out under the snow. You were the lucky ones. You eat the freshest meat, freshest bread, freshest cheese, freshest yogurt. And the one who left behind were the tired ones, the sick ones, and lucky ones. So we grew up thinking that we were somehow, special. There was nothing special up there from the materialistic perspective, from the living perspective. That's what we thought. That's one. Two, my mother always made me believe that I was very capable and was very special. And I always questioned it. And I said, why does she believe that? I haven't done anything special. But I think you always look at some of the journeys and you realize that someone really, really, really had an enormous amount of impact on those kind of confidence or some kind of sureness that coming from someone that paid a lot of attention to. So I think in my case, it was my mother. The other part is, sometimes not knowing it is not being aware of all the risk could make you more brave. I don't know if that's the word, because you're not in touch with reality of risks and analysts and conversations or bad stuff that happened to some bad people who started their businesses or journeys. All those things has no effect on you because you don't know any of those. So it makes you a little bit more confident. I don't know which one applied on mine, but I was pretty confident that I could figure this one out. Out of first 5 years in that journey of from that old factory, this yogurt that I worked on for 2 years nonstop, and with those four factory workers, and no experience of doing anything outside of that, just like focusing on those product and that factory, which I never left for the first 5 years. We built $1 billion business out of that factory within the first 5 years. And I didn't even know what we have done until somebody shook us up and said, did you realize what you guys have done has never been done before? You never raised penny. This might be the own company ever been seen. And I was still running the company until it was $700-800 million on QuickBooks. Like, I don't know if anybody knows what QuickBooks is. It's just like a small
accounting tax
program, right? Selma, help me out here. And you use family, accounting.
Yep.
So I kept it very, very simple. I was very present. I was right there, shoulder to shoulder from the beginning to when it was $1 billion. And then I look back and I said, look, not knowing all those sophisticated ways, I had no board. I had no one who had done this before, part of the company, until later on. And I realized that when you don't know all the other things that people talk about or practice, and you create your own way, it might be a little bit difficult, but it could be extremely an advantage of yours. So I didn't say why I should be doing this way. I don't like this way. I think it should be purpose-centered. I think it should be product-centered. I think the factory should be upfront. None of those I didn't know how others were doing. I had no visibility to that.
But you knew what you didn't like. You knew what you didn't want.
I knew exactly what I didn't want to be like.
Yeah.
As business, at the company who closed that place. But from the everyday operation, I had no visibility. So that became an advantage of me. But it was extremely difficult. Every day you doubt yourself. Every week you doubt yourself. Every month you make a decision. If you're wrong, it could be the last decision that you would make, right?
Do you still doubt yourself? Now that you've built this empire, you still doubt yourself. That's so interesting.
And that's fine. And I'm still afraid. I said, I'm pretty sure, but filled with an enormous amount of fear that, no one wants to fail. No one wants to go through the hardship and come out, damaged. And one of the things that I always doubt, but I always had this fear, but none of those things stopped me. So I will still walk through it, but it does have enormous amount of effect on your being going through this. Now, if you come out on the other side good, I don't know what the definition of the good is, then it's worth it because that's life. I had the second or third year, I had a guy came from all the way from Europe who was the CFO of a large company. And he came and he said, well, we're prepared to make you an offer and it starts with B. And I was like, well, does that mean billions? He said, yes. So now I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment in Utica. I'm eating, bagel and cream cheese in the morning with tea, and then pizza for lunch and dinner every day for the last, I don't know how many years. I only have Sundays afternoon break, and I'm almost, I would say I've been taking pain medicines every day in handful to maintain all the kinds of pains I have physically have. And then here's this guy comes and says, I'll give you $1 billion or billions if you turn over to us. And I start making calculations like, what do you do with billions? Like, what do you do? And I make a calculation of how much life one can live and divide that into years and months. It's like, how do you spend this money? And it was me and this guy in that pizza place. And I said, I must say no to you. And the guy says, tell me why. I have no partners. No one even know I exist. I'm up in this mountain, this village. And what I'm so interested is what's going to happen next in this movie. I want to see where this movie goes to. I don't know if I want to see the end of it, but I want to see. To me, this story is more valuable than the bees that you're putting into that place. Now, I'm proud of that decision because at that moment, no one could tell me yes or no. No one could tell me you should or you should not. No one, it's just like me, myself, and I making that decision in that moment. And the decision you're making against is somebody's giving you an enormous amount of money and something that you never thought it would happen 2-3 years before. And you basically say, I'm more interested in what's going to happen in this life, meaning more pain. Like, I have gone through so much, you're going to go through so much more pain. I know I was going to. Now this guy is more activated and energized to be a competitive to me, so it's going to make my life hell as a business. I know that because the offers, they come like that, is say, you want to sell? If you don't sell, we're going to make the same thing and we're going to make your life hell. And you accept that. That's what's going to happen. But yet, one of the proudest moments myself is I am more interested is where this is going to lead to. And I welcome good, bad, and ugly hardships and the joy. But in the end, what I value the most, and I know it's a cliche where people say it all the time, is true business, through this kind of journey, the sides of yourself that you discover and interaction that we do with other human beings and communities and people is something that you cannot put price on, something you cannot put price tag on. And that's what living is. That's what life is all about, is having those kind of experiences. And if you can do it through business, which I never thought growing up, you could have this kind of experiences through business because it's an ugly, dirty world on my book when I grow up. But if you can have it in business and have that kind of impact around, that it is as clean as it can be, it is nice, and it's a platform that you proudly associate yourself with it and your family with it, then it becomes extremely magical journey. And that is, to me, is the gift that I had in this country, that as a nomad from northeast of Turkey, and I never thought I would be in the field of business. And talking to you today, talking about this journey the last 12, 15 years, it's been a gift. It really has been. Not easy, but it's been a gift.
I mean, you've done a lot of things differently. You've done a lot of things differently than most CEOs. You've done a lot of things differently than most business people. And there is a question about the cost of that, right? So a lot of people will say, yeah, but this is the right thing to do. This is the moral way to go. You should pay people a living wage. You should offer them a stake in the company. You should. But if it were that easy, everybody would do it. So what is the true cost of staying true to the promises that you made in the beginning, the days of the factory of 4? What is the cost of staying true to the things that you said you were going to do?
Yeah, the part that when I started with those 4, and I'm describing that not knowing how to start and run a company any other way. So I had to adopt what I would do. So my background is human relationship up in the mountains. My background is the social dynamics where I grow up. And I always say this because those are extremely dynamic, like the real things still today in my well-being. So when you don't have other forces to organize the society and you have a living social dynamics, which is the respects, expectations, cultures, norms, whatever that is, and those are your operating system, and then you get rewarded or respected based on those social norms, that becomes an order. For me, is applying those in a business. And I realized later on is the field of business, especially on a large scale, is creating this unique, unreachable, pre-programmed field that people like me and ordinary people should not be able to be there unless they go through some kind of training, changes and all that kind of stuff to be fit in there. And I realized it's not that. It really isn't. Anybody can be. If you're running a family, you should be able to run a business, start a business. If you are in a village and you're taking care of, if you're a shepherd, knowing how to take care of your animals and sheep and dogs, that's management, that's prediction, that's leadership. That's all of that stuff really is in there in life. And all the goodness in life that everyone accepts as are good or bad can or should and must be in the field of business, unless it's an adopted system in there. You just go in and be whatever they expect you to be. So for my case, because I'm starting, because there's a bad example before me who are a large corporation closed this place, because I'm starting from absolutely nowhere. And this is a natural area for me to start. How? Because I don't know any other way. So I said, okay, we're just going to do it this way. I don't even know how the other ones have done it. So to me, it wasn't really by doing this, it cost me a lot more. It's just like my natural way of being in there. And later on, we talked about a new playbook. So for example, I said, why is the factory workers are the ones who work the hardest, but if something is not right, they were the one who pays the price the first, not the guys, not the people who are living in the high towers. They were the one first get fired. They were the first. The plant gets closed and they are out of the job. I mean, that just makes no sense. So I make sure that I'm a factory worker first before I am the person who's the startups. And it's still today. I mean, it's the same thing. The second thing came to me is I didn't understand why the village and town in my town, where I grew up, company, Chobani, South Edmiston, the kids felt a little less themselves than the next town who had the fancy fields and people are coming and visiting. Like, it reminded me that where I grew up, in my small town, that how we would look down in there than someone who lived in a rich place. It just made me a little bit angry and upset, and it was unjust. And we said, okay, how do we elevate that? How do we make sure that our children feel as worthy as anybody else's children, which is not less and not more, just as good. Later on, as it went in, and of course, when I started Chobani, the first thing that I got extremely problem with is if you lived in New York or in large cities and had high income, you could go to a fancy stores and buy a cup of yogurt that had naturally made and it was good ingredients. But if you lived in where I started the company and go to the store and you get a cup of yogurt, it was filled with, I don't know how many ingredients this thick, with filled up sugars and all the preservatives and bad stuff. So basically, where you live and what kind of income you had determine what kind of yogurt you would eat. And that's fundamentally wrong. I mean, like, I had enormous amount of problem with it. Like, you could say so many things about our region and Turkey and all that kind of stuff, but at least on yogurt, the field was flat. Everybody would be able to eat,
on yogurt at least, yes.
On yogurt, at least, I'm not talking about cars. I'm not talking about apartments. I'm talking about simple yogurt. Why that has to determine where you live, what kind of income you have. And that's just wrong. I mean, it's like,
But when it comes to America, that is something that happens frequently, right? Because at the end of the day, it's profit.
yeah.
And so how do you then, as a founder and as an entrepreneur, actually make the decision to say, no, we are going to provide natural ingredients, even if the cost is a little bit higher, because it's in line with your mission and your purpose? How do you then, I assume that not having a lot of stakeholders in the company is one way, but are there other ways that you can fight against, I would say, what the norm of the food industry is in the US?
Salma, that's a good question. So when you go to a purest ingredients, wholesome ingredients, try to make it natural. And if you're making yogurt, as a manufacturer, things get a lot harder when you don't use preservatives. And if you use, RBS2 hormone-free milks, real strawberries, live and active cultures, and make sure that enormous amount of proteins and nutritionally great, and then taste great, all that kind of stuff, the cost goes up and up and up and up. So the previous companies that I was competing with, like large ones, they will make the cup worth, let's say, I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm just giving an example. The ingredients in there will be cost 15 cents. And then you will spend 15 cents on marketing and try to tell everybody why this is so beautiful and delicious and why everybody's skinny and good looking and all that kind of stuff. That's the marketing, right? Which is pure lies. And then you put 30, 40, 50% margin in there. It's one of the most profitable business model you can think of. But if you go to the wholesome ingredients, your cost is going to be double, right?
Yeah.
It's just double. At least in the beginning, it's going to be double. So then you have to say, my margin is going to be less for me to be able to compete with the price and that everybody gets really good food. So you either have to reduce your margin, or you have to find a way that you are more productive, lean, less layers and cost saving from that perspective, but not touch the ingredients. Or you have to find an innovative way of communicating and marketing other than spending that much money on TV and everybody else does, so you can get, that kind of branding and marketing done. So you have to figure out your own way to be able to have larger audience, to have an access to better ingredient, good food is made, because the price is set. You have to go against that, that world. For me is, okay, I can do this. I'm not going to be very profitable. And I'm okay with that. But that means I have to raise that I'm going to sell this company at some point to somebody at some price. So I have to be also good to make certain amount of margins to be able to fuel my growth, so I don't have to go out and raise capital to be able to grow the company, because every time you raise a capital, you basically tell the world 5 years from now, 7 years from now, there will be a return for your capital. That means you're going to exit or something is going to happen. So how do you stay independent, create enough to be able to grow, but yet okay with not having, good margins or big margins? That means patient, and that means precise decisions, and that means very small, enormous amount of attentions on every details. And
did it ever mean failure?
That means a lot of failures, but not the failures that it will be catastrophic the whole journey. Because I had one, I almost bankrupt the whole thing, and you just cannot take your eyes off from this. Because in the food business, it's not everywhere. Some industries are different, but in the food business in America, if you're going against the big mass, it gets harder, and harder. And that means your decisions has to be more precise right in there, and you have to have an enormous amount of attention to every single details. And I learned how to do that. I learned how to do that day in and day out, because I'm the second year and third year in, I love this so much. I just loved every dimension of it. And my background allowed me to not to get in drunk with the material value of this, but yet value it that you could do so much with it when it comes to money. And even today, I value every dollar from its power that it has, but it doesn't determine to make me decision, what if I lose it and what my life is going to be like? That doesn't have any effect. So I have made some massive decisions. Like I built a plant in Idaho that state I have never been before, and a size of 1.2 million square feet and spent over $1 billion. And I had not even sold one cup out of it yet. And there was not even a study, market research, or anything that indicates that this large factory, that yogurt is going to come out of here, that people are going to buy. There's no, it's just like wild gas or very strong gut feeling. But that plant allowed us to be close to $3 billion sales now, and #1 brand in the country. I have made those kind of decisions. People think that wasn't easy decisions, but they were very hard decisions internally. But yet, I have made those decisions.
And you've actually talked about that before, right? Like the internal decision making in that you hear a lot of noise and then you hear yourself. And I'm curious as to how you hone in on your own voice when there's so many voices, especially now, I'm sure, so many voices of different people coming to you and telling you how you should run things or what you should do next. Where do you go to hear yourself? What do you do? What is the human thing that you do? Is it, do you go to the mountains?
I just came back. I mean, there are mountains in every one of us, inside of us, and we need to know how to go there. And I close the first question with this. There is a cost of doing things better, the way that you described it so beautifully. But in the long run, it's an advantage. It's an investment that you make. You think that it's a cost for it, for business. But soon after, you realize those investments that you make early days on people, on community, on food that you make for consumers, on sacrifices that you do to make things right, spend time. Those things are investments that turn into a powerful engines on your business going forward. It turns into an advantage. So it's not a sacrifice, it's an investment. If you see it this way, it only works if you have a long-term view. This is not a short-term transaction. It's a long-term thing. In the long term, is an absolute advantage. On that topic that you made, there are sounds and there are noises. The difficulties in this world is how to say which one is a nice melody that I should listen and which one is it just empty noise. Like, how do you say which one I should pay attention to, that I should hear there's some wisdom here, there's some knowledge here, I'm going to take it and I will use it. And this is just pure noise, pure, barrel coming down from the mountain. I have learned very early on to sit next to the fire or walk on the nature or just put music on and walk or go to shopping or just watch a movie. I prefer those than listening to somebody who's going to teach me some kind of lessons. I did never look down on those lessons. There are some valuable lessons that you can learn, but I have really isolated myself from a lot of noises, physically and also mentally. Because you're right, everybody will tell you something, whether you ask or not. There's enormous, especially now, you go to social media, there's always somebody's telling you what to do. I personally do believe, and this is on every single human being, if you give enough trust to yourself, enough confidence to yourself, like really do that meaningfully, not just because you saw some meditation app and say, just give yourself a confidence and all that kind of, but truly.
Yes, the meditation apps. Yes,
Train that engine that one of the safest, best resources on finding solution is yourself. And give more and more trust to that voice and give enough time. You will see what that internal system really leads you into the right place. And if it's based on your heart, that will have a lot of colors, a lot of taste. It just comes in a really right way. I think what world is telling us today is listen to this one, listen to this podcast, listen to this book, read this book, and that's that. No, read
Rumi.
read Rumi, read poetry, listen to some stories, and read some stories, and listen to grandma, listen to your mother, listen to the people on the street. And when you're buying an apple from the vendors, just find a way to hear that person's story, where it comes from, what's the life for him or for her. And these are real things. So what I mean is stay grounded and be part of life and isolate the noises.
That's beautiful. I definitely heard you are a very poetic soul, and that you were inspired by Rumi and Hafiz and the poets. So I can see where that comes into play. It's something very challenging, I think, to stay grounded. I think even no matter where you are, but as you're rising in any place, whether that rise is small or big, it's hard to stay grounded at times. And I think something that a lot of people are probably curious about is whether or not your thoughts have changed on, because in the earlier days, right, you had talked about the problems of inequality and inequity being around the rich and the businesses and the CEOs. But then now you're on the other side of it, right? So you see that there are problems still. I'm curious as to, has your thought process changed on the fundamental place that problem lies, or is it still the CEOs and the businesses and the rich that are not doing it right, that are not following the anti-CEO playbook, right?
So here's the world we're living in. I mean, we just passed through the UN week here in New York. Last year, CAP was in Cairo. We talked about where the world is going when it comes to sustainability, right? We know the world is going to an alarming place. You look at the wars, popped up in the last couple of years. You look at dictatorships and economic things. And I mean, you look at the snapshot on the world today and you say, okay, if I'm 20, 21, 22, my daughter is 2, what's the world is going to be like, 10, 15, 20 years from now? And what are the things that we need to do today to make the world in a better place or save the world, save humanity? I mean, there are some scenarios that, is this the end? Like, I don't want to sound like that. And then what are the things that we've been doing that has been effective? One of the things that we have been doing that it has no effect. So I am convinced from my small experience and a little bit of interacting for businesses on refugee front, that one of the most powerful change makers or effective platform is business in the world, period. Commerce works, business is effective, it's a large audience, and that's the reality. I mean, if you're not going to change the systems one way or another, which on our young times we have tried, this is what it is. Okay, you can be outside of this world and shouting at it, and you say how bad this business is and how horrible it is and how much is affecting the world and humanity in a wrong way. We've done that. That hasn't made an enormous amount of changes either. Or there is this conviction can be made through activated young, purposely filled workforce, and consumers become a force for business to change in a positive way. And if that happens, that's the only solution we have going forward for world to a better place. There has to be some newcomers like Chobani, some others, innovation, new companies, and all that kind of stuff. For the most part, that touches, like in the world of food, mining, trade, transportation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These companies are taking years to build. And you could come one or two from here and there, but their footprint is enormously large. So for me, if I think about my daughter's future, I would rather go into these companies and make them slowly change than trying to come up with new ones in every place, which will take 100 years or I don't know how many years to be able to change. But we're in a perfect place because Selma graduates from university, high school. I hope that you're graduating from university, and she's about to enter in the world of marketing or communication or corporate world. She's going to pick someone or some company is aligned with their mindset, but the things that the world should be, at least some elements of it. And someone who is in early days, young, buying some yogurt or computer or car or this and this, they're going to buy the brands and companies from the companies they believe shares the same view the world should be. So the companies have really convinced between the workforce that coming in available or the consumer that they have to do certain things differently, meaningfully, that they have to do certain things. The question comes is, they sometimes don't know how to do this because they've been operating profit centers for so long, and they don't know how to be stakeholder centers, like people, community, sustainability, and all that kind of stuff. And that has to start from somewhere. So I come down to one thing. On my early days of Chobani, I started hiring refugees in upstate New York. And I never knew that one day I would be talking about this. I learned that there are refugees, they're having a hard time finding jobs, and I talk about this all the time. I started hiring them. At some point, we have about 30% of our workforce in the plant with me were from people from 19 different countries, 16 different languages. It was like a United Nations in a small town upstate New York. And then when they start talking about refugees in a wrong way in the US during the elections, and then the Yazidis get attacked in Syria and kidnapped, and as they're Kurdish, and I just felt like personal to me. I came out on TV and I talked about this. And I went to Geneva and I realized that Yazidis or Kurds or people in that region, that Syrians, who became refugees, they were just a small portion, even though they were large. There's millions and millions of refugees around the world, and average time, 19, 20 years, they're in the camps, they're away from their homes. And this is just like human tragedy. And there's not even more than 1 or 2 companies that are involved in this topic. And I just said, wow, I just saw what happened at Chobani. I hired these refugees, and I didn't even know it was a refugee work. They were in the community, they have right to work, and I just hired them. The challenges where they were not having jobs is because of the language, or that they don't have cars, or that unfamiliarity. People didn't know if they should hire someone from Africa or Middle East or from Asia. When you overcome those obstacles, they become part of the company, and it became part of the success and became part of the society and community. And then they buy homes and they send their children to school. Some of them, they go to Ivy Leagues. They become this completely a different place just because an access to work, just like that one step into work have changed completely everything. I said, if I can take that example, and if I can try to encourage other companies to do so, maybe we can start doing something. So I start 2016 10th. All I did is, can I go to companies, large ones, and tell them one of the best decisions you can make is hire refugees, not just being a good person, but this is good for business. And I did so many economic reports, marketing reports, all that kind of stuff. Everyone says, we like you, we like your story, we like your yogurt. No, thank you. I mean, this is not what we want to touch. We send girls to school, we care about the whales in the sea. I said, those are nice, but can we do this too? Today, Selma, we have over 300 companies, large ones, but these are multinational big companies, like you name it, hiring hundreds of thousands of refugees, and they proudly talk about it. And this has happened in the last 6 years.
That's amazing.
An event in Europe, in 4 months, we had 50 companies committing to hire 250,000 Ukrainian refugees in Europe. That has an effect of over $1 billion in a year. We just did one in Mexico. We just did it here. And last year alone, those companies hired 10,000 refugees. What I'm saying is, business is a very powerful platform. And these CEOs now, these companies are hiring refugees, not because they're trying to look nice. They see the benefit, what it does to their culture, what they see the benefit, what it does to their productivity. They see what the benefit of loyalty and internal culture, and et cetera, et cetera. So I am in this side. I am still an outsider in this side. I am convinced that if we're going to make a change going forward, fastest change is if we can start changing these companies slowly and small, in one bit at a time. And that is in the shoulder of you, all the people who listen to you, all the young people are coming out of universities and going into the world of business. I encourage them to go into the businesses and go into those places where they start and slowly making those changes, because the world needs it and the humanity needs it in a very dramatic way.
And I think this is inspiring for a lot of people, especially that are listening from our platform, because we have students and graduates that are sitting right now in the Middle East, in different parts of rural Africa, in Eastern Europe, in Latin America, and they're all listening to your story and they're all wondering, well, how do I make an impact, right? How do I take my next step? And Chobani has done, I mean, beyond food, right? And beyond an incredible yogurt, my favorite. But beyond that, you've also worked to fight against the big challenges of the world, climate change, against the food industry that is, I would say, polluted in America. And so how do you approach this, and how is Chobani, and how are you making an impact in those larger spaces than just the yogurt industry?
You know, I never said I'm in the yogurt business. I'm in the changing the world business, one cup at a time. You know,
I love that.
If you told me you're going to spend your life making yogurt, I said, that's a waste of time. You know, I love making yogurt, but I wouldn't waste my time for it. But if you say you can make changes, small or big, every time you make this, then I'm in, right? Because that's a big picture. And you know, we always say here at Chobani, cup of yogurt won't change the world, but how you make it might. You know, it's a possibility. It is that how you interact. I mean, companies have foundations and, you know, sustainable arms and effect arms and all that on the side. You know, I dismissed Chobani Foundation very early on. We just had it and I just dismissed it. I said, we don't need foundation. Chobani needs to do this internally in the house. You can come up with an idea. You can insist on certain dimension. You can put some kind of red line, but it really doesn't come into an effective place unless you create a community within, that they truly believe in this. They truly believe in this mission. Everybody wakes up in the morning that they know that they're going to go to work. Whatever they're going to do is going to lead up to become this. And it's very clear what that is. And that's very clear what that purpose is. And if you create that environment, which cannot be created by just putting the statements on the wall or putting the video or ad or somebody writes about it. It has to be real within seconds and minutes and hours and days and weeks inside whatever those places are. Then you have this unique things called culture. Everybody talks about this, but it's really operating system. It is very powerful stuff. But it requires founders, leaders to spend an enormous amount of time with people in minutes, in hours, in years to be able to make it in the right place. And it's not easy to build, but it's very difficult to ruin it. So you have to be very disciplined to stay the course. And it gets tested when things are really bad. But the economy is bad, there's a recall, I don't know, something bad happens, something. In those bad days, people watch how much you're committed to those fundamentals in a bad day. Good days, everybody's good. But in a bad days, you go through these tests. But once you pass them, it becomes powerful tool in every dimension, right? So my goal is, how do I take Chobani what it is today, making the product that we're making? We have made more than yogurt. We made milks, we made creamers, we're expanding in different places. But how I always said, I don't want more, but how wide you get, how big you get, the impact gets bigger. So if that's the reason that you want to get bigger, then I'm in, right? I don't, that's the only reason that you want to grow, you want to get expanded geographically, because there's certain things comes with it that breaks certain things. I like to think, in our private way, in the recent history, you look at it, how the brand is built, how the product became popular, how people became loyal to it, and how we became a center of attraction to a lot of talents and give them a place for them to put their work into workplace, not just mine, but everybody else's. And how is that becomes collectively, comes from the same source, like same sound, same, feelings. It is this magical people that I work with every day that comes from all different backgrounds, and their hunger for making really good changes and use their capability and talent in the field of business and satisfy their creativity from that direction and making income for themselves and their loved ones. But yet, one of the biggest gifts is you go home and you put your head into your pillow and you close your eyes and say, that was a good day. That's what the life is all about.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to wake up in the morning and go back and do the same thing, that you do not have any, like, I said this after, I think, 2016, so maybe 7-8 years after. I started the journey of Chobani, in a couple of years in, like a few years before I lost my mom. And, if you're in the region, our mothers, they have this hat scarf.
Scarf.
Yeah, scarf, and carry it. And she had one in green when she was, really ill. And I hold that with me. I was very close to my mother. And I'm a hat person. I'm not trying to make an advertising. I always have a hat, and usually it's a Chobani or Tant or La Colombe hat. And when I did the employee stock options, I took my hat off and I grabbed that green scarf from my hat. It was always there in my hat. No one knew it. Only I had it. For years, I always put that scarf under my hat. The reason I did that is, look, field of business can be very challenging. Sometimes you might lose control. Sometimes you get excited about money and wealth and you do some stupid things. For me, is I needed support system. And someone who can always keep me online was my mother. so I came in there. It's like, would my mother be okay if I do this? I would not do this. So what I'm saying is, whether it's your mom, when I told the people, I said, you will give me the credit that I'm doing this, but the author of this is the person who carried this scarf, and that's what my mother was. What I'm saying is, you need either partners or business colleagues or founders, the people you work with, that when you lost the way, if you wake up some days, get influenced with some different opinions and ideas of something that is not aligned with your principles, you need a support system to put you back to the line and support you during that time. And that is enormously important as business or journey gets successful, that has really, really good people around you, good friends. Mothers are always very direct, will tell you, but some of us might not have those, those around. It's very important to create that ecosystem that if you or the main leaders are losing the way, there is the force to bring it back to what natural place is. And I have benefited from people around me that will tell me sometimes I lost the way, and they will say, you are not going in the right direction. You need to go to this space. And that's another reason to have really, really good people believe in this very early on with you.
I mean, there are so many questions that I wanted to ask you, even just on that topic, but I don't want to take so much more of your time. I'll close out with one question, Hamdi, and I'm going to keep it kind of on the track of what you're talking about, because I do think the people that you keep around you will ultimately be the people that influence your decisions in your life. And I'm curious as to how you personally make a choice of, I know that you hire like a lot of young first and second generation people, refugees in the company. You have different colleagues from all different mindsets, but how do you then choose someone? What characteristics do you look for in a person that you are going to keep close to you in that inner circle? What are the key qualities that you look for in a human being where you feel like this is a person I can keep in my cabinet?
Yeah, that's in the end, we are in the, I don't know if I like that line, but we are in the people's business, right? People are the ones makes the journey, makes things happen. And collectively, every individual is extremely important. Even though if it's a large organization, every individual, the power of one. Early days of Chobani, I never looked at the background. What is the background? What is the study? What kind of degree? What kind of experiences? No one had any idea. So we'll say, including myself, we'll figure this thing out. We will sum up. And there was two reasons for that. One is I truly believe in that, and second one is the others who has been there and done that would never come and join me anyway. So
This guy doesn't know where he's going. I'm not going with him.
Turkish guy studying your company upstate New York. Yeah. So yeah, I'll go to San Francisco. I really do believe that we need to look beyond, and people say this all the time, beyond those identities, whether the study, experience, and all that stuff. That's one. The second thing is, when you meet people, they come, and including myself, they come with this pre-beliefs what this job is going to be like. And you're sitting on the other side and says, what if this person does this and this and this that he or she doesn't even know they could? So it's designed, the person fits into a role instead of role is designed around the person. So what I'm saying, I'm always celebrating the person than the position. On the personality side, there is this, style at Chobani that if you're outside of it, you're never going to survive, right? It's a trust base. It is kindness base. It is basically, I'd like to believe that anyone can be whoever they are, like, whatever the background is. I mean, I was in a family day this weekend upstate. All the factory workers, they bring their family members, and I try to not to miss any of them every year. And we hug, we kiss, we play. Our children are playing together. My son was there. I mean, if you take pictures of this, like, where am I? Like, am I in Asia? Am I in Africa? Am I in South America? Am I in upstate New York? It is the most beautiful scenery that you would ever see anywhere. But yet, everyone's so comfortable being who they are. Build friendships and all that kind of stuff. And that's the humanity in family without, if you don't put a lot of, politics and prejudgments in it. Like, if people interact with each other, they will find 99% of the time they love each other. They agree with each other. So one of the biggest thing is, how do I create a place where everybody is themselves, himself, herself? Because if you're authentically yourself, then you can create something that belongs to you instead of pretending to be somebody else and create something out of it. So if that doesn't fit your personality, which I look for, the system will spin you out, whether in the first month or 6 months or 6 years, but it will always spin you out. So it needs to fit in that culture, that you need to be naturally that person to be able to. But I love energy. I love competitiveness. We always say at Chobani, we are shepherds and we are warriors. I love the fighting side of things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a soft guy. I'm not like, I'm a very, very competitive things. But if you use that to move humanity forward, to have people eat better food, to make businesses, more like stakeholders instead of profit centers, and you bring that healthy anger to it, healthy competitive to it, fueled by love, then it's business, then it's good, and it's fun, and that's what keeps me up in the morning and come in. They ask Warren Buffett, how long does it take to pick a person? And he says, like, within first 5 minutes or 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And somebody says, well, that's just not fair. That you can look at somebody within 10 seconds, you can tell if that person fits or not. And I said, well, let me put me like 50 years plus 5 seconds. It's a lot of experience.
Yes. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book about that. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You do a lot of those. But then I always go back to the mountains, and I finish it this way. And my father, you grow your sheep and you have these baby lambs, and then some strangers comes into the mountains and they want to buy your baby lambs and take them to big cities, and then usually they go sell and they come back and pay your money. And some of them are strangers, and people will trust them to give their livelihood to this person and believing that that person is going to show up. And I always ask and say, how do you know that this person is going to do that? How do you know to go to this stranger place and put the tents up and trust that your family is going to be safe? It's all human connections, And if we come like from that traditional place in every city, town, villages across the world where the listeners are joining from, if you are connected to the basic of life, those abilities is within our families, within our communities, within our neighborhoods. We bring that in without getting affected by all the outsiders and noises. It's us as an individual. If we really enrich with those fundamentals, we don't need to look a lot outside to get those wisdoms from.
That's beautiful, Hamdi. You are very poetic. I do have to say, you're very heartful. You're very soulful. It comes across in your words, and I think in the honesty and integrity behind your mission and your purpose. So I just want to thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate that we took out an extra chunk of your time, because I know your time is very valuable. So thank you for being here. Thanks for inspiring us. Thanks for sharing with us. And thanks for building a company that we can all be proud to know, and that we're really excited to see what you do next. For everybody watching here today at the Green Talent Forum, thank you for being here, because this is a part of your journey, and this is a part of you becoming the future leaders like Hamdi, following in his footsteps, and changing the world. And I just want to also drop for everybody that's on here that we have another amazing session lined up. If you're staying with us at the Green Talent Forum, Gillian Caldwell from USAID is speaking with us today about climate and energy. So do you seem to know her? I guess, of course you do.
Samantha and Gillian and everyone in USAID does magical work.
Yes.
To be partnered very closely. They are my heroes. So my best greetings, but I think what they do, what they have been doing, especially this leadership, is pretty amazing. So my best.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Hamdi. And it's very nice to meet you. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you at the next session. Take care. Bye.